And Catherine, I'm curious to know, because you come from a blogger's perspective as somebody that puts together your own outfits, goes shopping fairly often, in some way creates the trend but also follows the trend, and you're a lot like the people in this room. And you know, Kristen touched on that you have to be influential, and I'm wondering, as you look at people on the internet as your trendsetters, what makes them influential to you?
Honestly, I think that anyone that makes or wears clothing has the opportunity and potential to be a trendsetter. But with the internet, there's been more, I think that normal people have been more influential in the fashion community. My definition of a trendsetter would be someone that creates a trend or someone that makes something pre-existing popular. So basically anyone can do that. It's not just limited to designers and celebrities like it was in the past. I think that more people have a say in what's going on, and I think that brands are starting to realize that, and if they aren't realizing that, then there's also, like, they just, basically, in the past, I think that, well, basically for ever, designers have been designing for a target group, but now they have to focus more on, they're able to see exactly who their consumers are. So I think that it's kind of an interesting relationship now.
And on that point, now that we can, with street style, sort of the blogging atmosphere, now that we can see our trendsetters, I'm curious to know what makes someone more relevant than the other, insofar as, you know, we talked about WGSN, and Kate, you touched on music and street style. And as going forward, I think the question is, what makes something relevant to the time, what is more relevant, and what is more valuable to you to look at as a brand? Kristen?
That's a good question. What makes something more relevant? Well, I think the advantage that bloggers have and the platforms such as Streetopia is that it's much easier to have a conversation with the people that you are influencing versus if you look at some brands and how they approach it, they're telling versus conversing and listening. So I do think the power of a community and people together shaping a trend makes it more relevant and more powerful. So I think brands need to wake up and recognize that, and it's certainly our goal as KEDS to figure out how can we engage in a conversation with a consumer and multiple consumers so we can use them, in a sense, converse with them, communicate with them to help us pioneer and shape the brand, because that's what I think establishes meaning for both parties.
And on that note, about starting a conversation, I'm curious to know how you, with KEDS or in your other experience with other brands, how you go about interacting. Because I think it's very hard for brands, you know, how do I even start the conversation? And there's this whole, am I spamming them via Twitter or, you know, asking them to enter a million things on Facebook? And I'm curious to know how KEDS handles that interaction.
Yeah, we're really just at the beginning of that. Lori Heller, who's over here on table one, manages all of our social media for us in addition to other initiatives. And we're really at the infancy. I think, you know, we are conversing, but we still have work to do to try to figure out how we can capture the conversation as it's coming in and activate that. So we're really just at the beginning of trying to tackle that.
And Kate, in this space, as you watch brands, how have you seen them interact with trendsetters successfully or unsuccessfully?
Let's see. Well, companies some companies have always tapped into what trendsetters were doing and used that information to influence their design. And they used to do it offline, and they used to have focus groups and do consulting. And as Christine mentioned, also services like WSGN, it's a trend service. It's a private trend service, which is now online. But these things have been around since at least the 1950s. You would subscribe to them, and they would send you inspiration boards and lookbooks and stuff like that. And it was all coming, much of it was coming from the street. They would go around and photograph people on the street. But now all of that is available to everyone because there's all these street photographers and communities like Chictopia where anyone can participate. And the community decides what is exciting to them, and they vote something up and make it more visible. And I have heard that that designers are now looking at street photography, of course, and looking at communities like Chictopia and Lookbook New to see what people are wearing. So I think that's a big change. And I think it's really exciting how social media has made it possible for anyone to publish and to develop an audience or a market and to find other like-minded people. And it's true that you don't have to be in New York or London or Paris anymore. You can be anywhere and you can see what people are wearing all over the world in an instant. And that's very exciting and influential. And you don't have to wait for it to come out in Vogue magazine either.
And I'm curious to know as well, you touched on how everything is sort of global now, the globalization of fashion via the internet. I'm curious to know who you think the trendsetters are specifically on the internet.
Oh, that's a good question, because I think it is different on the internet versus offline. There was, okay, now I'm forgetting her name, but who's the woman a few years ago who was photographed by Cobra Snake? Who was her boyfriend?
Corey Kennedy.
Corey Kennedy, okay. She was very influential a few years ago on the internet specifically. And she, in American Apparel, I think, made it absolutely essential to walk around without any pants. And right now, I think it's different for everybody, but I find, well, I'm influenced by people who are doing something different. That's what I find interesting. And I think Jane Eldridge of Sea of Shoes has a pretty unique personal style. And I find that influential, although I don't think that she certainly has not reached any kind of mass market. I don't think there's any designers right now who are influenced by Jane Eldridge. That may change in a few years. I find Tavi influential, not so much for what she's wearing, but more because she sends out a message that it's okay to be whoever you are, even though when she started, she was only 12 or 13. And I think that's really empowering for other people, and that it's okay to wear whatever you want to wear. And you don't have to like slavishly imitate whatever, I don't know, Chanel says is the next big thing. Let's see who else on the internet right now. I guess a lot of people would say that Alexa Chung is influential. That might be true because she's very photographed.
So you would say, and I think the pattern with sort of Tavi and Jane, and even Susie Bubble, I think of Tavi as sort of like a younger Susie Bubble in a way, is that they're doing something different. And it's not really, they aren't getting influenced by brands. Brands are getting influenced by them. And I think we saw that with Rodarte and Tavi and Martinez and Tavi, and Urban Outfitters and Jane. And I think that that's an interesting sort of switch in relationship as far as shoppers and brands go. And Catherine, I'm interested to know from you, from a blogger's perspective, who are the trendsetters on the internet for you?
Ultimately, I think that a lot of the same people are trendsetters on the streets and online. Most bloggers that I follow, at least, they seem to be normal people who aren't necessarily in the fashion industry. So I think that on the internet, everyone has a say in what's going on, and it makes everything really accessible. Someone that lives in Texas can being friends with someone that lives in Washington. So blogging has a community that goes along with it, and there's more of a personal connection rather than just a store dictating what trends are next. And I follow many bloggers. Quite a few of them are actually in this room. So, but there's also Jane, Tommy, all of them, and also the ones that shop exclusively at thrift stores. I think that's pretty incredible, and I think that a lot of stores are actually creating items that look like they came from thrift stores, like Urban Outfitters and to some extent Forever 21.